Hi, welcome back to the Distressed Princess. I have an exciting video for you today. Look at all this Valentine cuteness I have for you today. And if you think I made this with a vinyl cutter, you'd be wrong. You know, I have a Cricut and I do use it on occasion, but I like to provide you with lots of other options to make beautiful home decor projects or even things that are nice enough that you could sell. And so that's why today I have partnered with Essential Stencil. They have kindly sent me some stencils to show you, and they are sponsoring this video today. Plus, they have packaged up everything they sent me in a limited bundle for the Distressed Princess, and you guys are going to be able to purchase it in my description box down below. Before we actually begin stenciling anything, let me show you some things that you'll need. An old pan that your stencils can fit down into comes in real handy. Some stencil brushes, some painter's tape or masking tape, some sandpaper, and the Essential Stencil Company recommends using chalk paint because it's thicker than regular acrylic paint and will do better with the stencils. Now let's stencil. I got a whole lot of blank things that I can put stencils on. I got them from the Dollar Tree and they're so stinking adorable. However, this one did need a little touching up around the edges where for some reason its white paint didn't go all the way around. And since I was already painting, I decided to touch up some on the top too. In order to get the crispest lines with your stencils and try to avoid the bleed through, it's best to try to use as smooth a surface as possible. So that's what you use your sandpaper for if you're working with a wooden project or something that you've painted with chalk paint. It's best to sand that down a little bit and get it smooth. Now we're ready to stencil. This is one of the Valentine stencils that came in this 6-pack, and everything will be linked in my description box below. There will be a bundle that you can buy everything that I'm using in this video here today. So make sure you check out the description box when you're finished watching to go and get your own stencils. So I've positioned the stencil where I want it on my project. Now you use your painter's tape or masking tape to tape it down so that it doesn't move around on you while you're stenciling. And of course, aim to get that stencil as flat onto your project as possible. Now it's time to dip the brush, I'm using a stencil brush, into the paint, and you will do like a dry brush technique. So you see I'm offloading the majority of that paint off of the brush onto the wax paper, and I'm going to swirl that brush around in small circles over the stencil, and it's just putting a minimal amount of paint onto the project. If you get too much paint on your brush, you're going to have some bleed through. That paint will go under where the stencil lines are and you won't like the result. So offload that paint onto a napkin, paper towel. I'm just using the wax paper that I always put under my projects while I'm painting, and use a dry brush technique, and you're going to have some beautiful stencils. While the paint is still wet, I like to undo a couple of sides and peel it back just to see if it did what I wanted it to, if I need to fill in any more spots, and that way I can put it back down if I need to. But I liked the look of this, so I went ahead and took it all the way off. To save yourself some hassle later, this is what the pan is for. You put some warm water in it, and when you take your stencil off of your project, put it directly into the pan of water so that the paint doesn't really have time to stick to the stencil. This will save you a lot of time when it comes to cleaning your stencils, which I'll show you at the end of this video. Next, I dried up my paint really quickly with my hair dryer, and I did a little light sanding over the paint so that it's distressed and it looks like it's blended right into the wood, which I love that effect. And I love the simplicity of the colors and the design of this one. Now that we've got the hang of it, let's try something a little different. I'm using this wooden heart that I've had in my craft stash for some time, and now I have the perfect reason to use it. So with this one, I'm using another of the mini Valentine's Day stencils that comes in a 6-pack, and I'm going to do something different with this one. Instead of using chalk paint, I decided I wanted this to look like the design was burned into the wood, kind of like an engraving. So instead of chalk paint, I'm going to use Waverly antiquing wax. And again, I'm using a stencil brush, and these are included in the bundle in my description box, so you'll be all set to do your stencils. Now, I dipped just a little bit into just the lid of that antiquing wax, and then I'm brushing off as much of it as I can. You want this to be a really dry brush because the antiquing wax is a little runnier than chalk paint, so you don't want very much on your brush at all. But I promise the least little amount will show up on a lighter color wood like this. And again, I'm just using small little circle swirly motions to go all over the stencil. Take all the tape off except maybe the top piece and leave it down and do a little peekaboo and see if you got all the areas that you needed to get, which again, I was very happy. I love that reveal. Oh, that's my favorite one. Peel it all the way off. Don't forget, put your stencil into the pan of water that you have prepared so that will be easier to clean up later. And the next part is optional. I didn't do it in the first project because I didn't see that it really needed it. But if you look closely, you can see where the stencils kind of have a little gap. So you can take a small little paintbrush and your paint, or in this case, the antiquing wax, and fill in those little tiny gaps so that they're all smoothed over. And that's it. She is stunning. Here's another item I've had in my craft stash for a while. It's an old antique cheese box, and I thought it would be really cute to use one of these stencils on the side. And here's another of the little minis that comes in the 6-pack, but I'm going to use it a little differently than how it's laid out on the plastic. So I'm going to spell out love on the side, and I'm going to do this in 2 phases. So do like normal and tape down your stencil where you want the L and the heart to go. And I'm back to using the white Waverly chalk paint. I've dipped my brush into the paint and I have wiped off the majority of it on a piece of aluminum foil. If it's crumpled up, that really helps to get a lot of that paint off of the brush, and so you won't have any globs. And then apply it to the stencil just like I showed you before. Then while the paint is still wet, I remove the stencil. Now then, move the stencil down to apply the V and the E. And you're of course going to need to tape it down, but you can see that the tape on the left side is going to overlap the heart. So what you'll need to do before you tape that down is make sure that your paint is dry. So I'm using my hot hair dryer to dry the paint up before moving on. Then you can safely put the painter's tape down over the paint and continue on with your stenciling. This one had some gaps that I wanted filled, so again, take a very tiny brush and just fill them in. Another really great thing about using chalk paint is if you do get a little bleed through and you want to clean it up a little, it's really easy to use just a damp rag or a wet paper towel and your thumbnail or fingernail to wipe away any of it that's a little messy. Another item from the Dollar Tree. This one's really pretty cute for a Valentine's Day decoration, although I think it's probably for a wedding. I'm going to give it a makeover using one of our stencils, but I'm going to do something different. I'm not going to use paint or the antiquing wax this time. I'm going to use spackle, and you'll see how. So I removed the original graphic from the frame, and I'm going to paint it with this Agave Waverly chalk paint. It's a beautiful color, and it took 2 coats to cover up the original design. I used my hair dryer to dry up the paint real super quick, and if I were going to be using some paint with this stencil, I would sand it down to make that chalk paint very smooth. But since I'm not using paint, I'm using spackle, which I'm going for a textured effect here, then I don't need to worry about sanding because it doesn't really matter if it's smooth. Now this stencil was bigger than the piece I was stenciling on, so instead of taping it to the front, I just flipped it over and I'm taping it on the back side. I'm using lightweight spackle from the Dollar Tree, but I imagine any spackle will do just fine. And I'm using a spatula to apply it. Well, first I kind of use my fingers and then I smooth it out over the stencil with the spatula, and I'm being very careful to use a light hand, and I don't want that spackle to go underneath the stencil, so I'm making sure the stencil is pressed down firmly onto the project, and I just spread the spackle over the top. Since this was an experiment just to see if it could be done, I didn't quite know what the next step should be, but I thought maybe I could dry it up a little bit with the hair dryer before I proceeded, and I think that was a good idea. So next I had to decide how to get the stencil off of the project, and I decided just to do face down, and as gently as I could, I removed the tape, and then I removed the project from the stencil as you just saw. So kind of backwards, but look at the results. That is just amazing. That worked out so much better than I could have hoped. I set it aside so that the spackle could fully dry, and I didn't come back to it for a couple of hours. And then when it was dry, I replaced it back into its frame and the project was done. So I thought this one would be a really neat thing to do if you have like beach themed decor in your house and you want to decorate for Valentine's Day with a beachiness theme. This agave blue color is the perfect thing for that. And this stencil, even the heart, I think kind of looks like a seashell. So that's just a suggestion, but I love how this one turned out. Here's a kind of unconventional way to use a stencil. I'm going to try to make it a bleached effect on this black t-shirt. So the first step is to put a piece of cardboard inside your shirt so the bleach does not soak through to the back. Then position your stencil on your shirt where you want it to be. By the way, this stencil is 12 inches by 16 inches. It was the perfect size for this extra large t-shirt. Now, the next thing is bleach. Now, some people use bleach water and some people use straight bleach. I'm using straight bleach because that's what I had in this bottle already. And I had to apologize. When I first sprayed this out onto this stencil, you can see there's kind of brown. So bleach kind of erodes the insides of metal things, I guess. So yeah, never mind that. It doesn't affect the quality of the project, thankfully, because this is a black t-shirt, but just be aware of that. Maybe freshen your bleach bottle every now and then. Anyway, I put this on a misting setting, and I misted and misted all over this several times, and it pretty instantly started changing colors. This is, by the way, a high cotton count on this shirt. It's a Hanes t-shirt that I think came from the Dollar General store, so it might even be 100% cotton, but if you have too much polyester, it won't bleach as well, so just be aware of that. So you can see this is in real time. It's already started changing colors. I sprayed until I thought I had it pretty good saturated, and then I used a paper towel on the top of the stencil so that when I take the stencil off, the wetness isn't rolling off the stencil onto the shirt. So here's the big reveal, and believe me, I was just as shocked as you are. It worked perfectly. I know my focus is a little blurry, but it'll clear up in here in just a second. The next thing you want to do is to stop the bleaching process. You do that with peroxide. So mix up a little peroxide in a sink full of water or a bucket full of water, about half and half, and dunk your shirt down into it. And wash and dry like normal before you wear it, and this was really cool to do. These are really quality stencils, so you want to take care of them. They're going to last you a lifetime, and so that's why I wash them after every use. So here's the pan of water that I've been dipping my stencils into as I go along. I'm going to dump that all out, and now I'm going to clean them. If you have any that still have paint on them that didn't come out in the pan of water, I like to use the Dawn Power Wash. And I put them down in my sink, I spray them down, and then I just clean them off with a wash rag and rinse and dry. Now let's take a look back at all our stencil projects today. So everything I used in this video today is bundled up and ready for you to purchase down in my description box below. And there's a discount code. It's TDP10 to receive 10% off your order. Thanks for watching. Have a lovely rest of your day. And if you want to see more crafting fun, check out the link that I provided for you right here. And I'll see you next time. Bye.